Hi, everyone. Welcome to OsteoBites, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Christina Iptoma, and I am mom to Osteo Angel Dillon and Director of Scientific Programs at MIB Agents. And today on OsteoBites, we are joined by Nancy Goodman from Kids v. Cancer to discuss the Give Kids a Chance Act. Thanks so much, Nancy, for joining us on OsteoBites today. We are thrilled to have you. And we're also very excited to have two members of our MIB Agents Junior Advisory Board, Jillian and Daniel, joining us as panelists today. Please feel free to submit questions during the presentation through the Q&A in Zoom, and we will share those with our guests after the presentation. A little bit more about our guest today. Nancy Goodman is the founder and executive director of Kids v. Cancer, which is a nonprofit that promotes pediatric cancer research by identifying structural impediments at key junctures in the research process, drugs, tissue donation, and access to funding, and developing strategies to address them. Through Kids v. Cancer, Nancy has championed the Creating Hope Act, which was passed into law in 2012, creating a market-based incentive to spur pediatric rare disease drug development. Kids v. Cancer also championed the Race for Children Act to update the Pediatric Research Equity Act, also known as PREA, which requires companies to share drugs that act upon the same biomarkers as those active in pediatric cancers, opening up vast new opportunities for pediatric cancer drug development. And now, Kids v. Cancer is spearheading an effort to ask Congress to pass the Give Kids a Chance Act, so that scientists can not only study new drugs in kids, as they can now, but to study the drugs in combinations with other drugs so that they may find cures. Kids v. Cancer also organizes Climb the Hill Day in Washington, D.C., which many of our MIB Agents Junior Advisory Board members have participated in, and we'll talk more about what Climb the Hill is all about. Nancy founded Kids v. Cancer after her son Jacob Froman died of medulloblastoma in 2009 when he was 10 years old. And earlier in her career, she was an international trade lawyer. She received her JD from the University of Chicago and her Master of Public Policy from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nancy. We're very excited to learn more about legislative advocacy, which is a very powerful lever for and driver for getting better treatments to our pediatric cancer patients. And we're very much looking forward to learning more about the Give Kids a Chance Act and how our community can best advocate for it. I just have a few announcements before we get started. We hope you can join us at our annual Factor Osteosarcoma Conference, June 26th to 28th in Salt Lake City. Our scientific program is now available, and I'm going to put a link in the chat where you can find it. We will have 7 scientific panels, as well as our very popular patient panel. And I wanted to especially highlight 2 scientific breakout sessions, which are great opportunities to engage in the conversation at Factor. We will be offering a young investigator mentoring and coaching session in partnership with SARC, which will be led by Dr. Scott Acuno from Mayo Clinic, Dr. Lara Davis from Oregon Health and Sciences University, and Dr. Kevin Jones from the University of Utah. The second session is an open forum on advancing single-cell research into clinical care for osteosarcoma patients, led by the Cure OS Working Group. Participants will review evolving recommendations on using single-cell technologies to study intratumoral heterogeneity and the tumor microenvironment, and discuss strategies for translating these insights into personalized treatments. I will put the link to find more information on Factor and how you can register in the chat. Also just wanted to point out that MIB does have a conference room block at the Grand America Hotel where the conference is taking place, and you can take advantage of the discounted room rate by booking at the Factor reservation link. Our scientific travel award deadline has passed, but we still do have a limited number of travel awards for Osteo Warriors. The travel awards cover registration and most travel expenses within North America for an Osteo Warrior and 1 caregiver. And to be eligible, Osteo Warriors have just to be between the ages of 8 and 22, be physically able to travel to Factor, but would require financial assistance to do so. Candidates must be nominated by a social worker, child life specialist, or medical professional. And I will put a link in the chat where you can find more information. And the nomination deadline is in early June, so you still have lots of time to think about that. All right, let's get going with our presentation today. Daniel, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Daniel Saptari. I'm from Massachusetts. I'm a senior in high school and a part of the MIB Junior Advisory Board. I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma when I was 13 in my left femur, and I've since gotten a rotationplasty, or I got limb salvage surgery, and then I now have a rotationplasty. I was also on the at the Climb the Hill Day with Jillian and Nancy in March last year, where we advocated for the Give Kids a Chance Act. So, and I'll hand it off to Jillian now.
Hi, I'm Julian Okimoto. I'm a freshman in college, and I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma back in 2017. And since then, went through a practice called distraction osteogenesis in order to regrow my right femur. And I'm also part of the junior advisory board alongside Daniel. And as Daniel mentioned, I was a part of the Climb the Hill Day with Nancy Goodman as well. And now I'll hand it off to Nancy.
Thank you, Daniel and Jillian, and thank you, Christina. So what I want to talk about today, I have sort of three pieces. One is, how you think about, as you're thinking about how to engage in making the world, a better and safer place for children and teens and young adults with osteosarcoma. What are the universe of options, and how do I think about what we're doing at Kids versus Cancer within that universe? Second, I want to talk to you about the Give Kids a Chance Act and another bill that's now part of it called the Creating Hope Act. It's the Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program reauthorization. So I want to talk about them substantively and talk about the legislative history. But then I really want to spend a good chunk of our time on Climb the Hill Day and other things that you all can do to be engaged. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I have no disclosures to report. This is my son, Jacob. He had medulloblastoma, brain tumor. You know the story. The treatments available for Jacob were inadequate. And what I was most surprised by is that when Jacob was in treatment, while cancer drug development for adults has really progressed at a very exciting clip, for rare cancers and for cancers of children and young adults, that is not the case. So I want to start with a little joke, and it's a pink elephant because here we are in a new part of American history, and it's how do you eat an elephant, right? So if the elephant is how do you cure cancer, there's just so many things to do, and how do we eat the elephant? And of course, the answer is one bite at a time. So I want to talk to you about that's the elephant, and there is just so many people in this ecosystem, all of whom are really critical and play critical roles, whether the scientists who develop the new treatments and the physicians who treat patients, but also biotech and pharmaceutical companies that, are developing the drugs, regulators at the FDA and EMA who evaluate the drugs and provide guidance to companies and to academics. And of course, us advocates and patients. I hope those folks in the audience are not thinking of us as just sort of an extra follow-on piece. We're really critical to this ecosystem. If you think about biting one little piece of the So the answer: how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And I just want to list here a few things that advocates in our community have been doing, including folks at MIB, including awareness, fundraising for research, infrastructure support. So MIB has your Factor Conference, creating databases, natural history studies, family support. Advocates have started drug companies and invested in drug companies and done legislative advocacy, as we're doing at Kids v. Cancer. And even among legislative advocacy, we see here a smaller bite, there's two big categories of legislative advocacy. So legislative advocacy, of course, refers to efforts of advocates to ask Congress and legislative branch, state Congresses as well, to pass laws. So there's two kinds of advocacy. One is funding. Obviously the federal government or state governments have financial resources. And then the second one is regulatory reform, changing rules of the road. And there are numerous kinds of regulatory reform, whether it's FDA regulatory reform, which is what we do here at Kids v. Cancer, but there's also tax reform. There's safety, there's reform on safety and FDA guidelines on drug development. But again, at Kids v. Cancer, we focus very narrowly on legislative advocacy to achieve regulatory reform in the area of FDA regulations. And even there, I want to talk about there's sort of two pieces to FDA regulations that we focus on both of them here at Kids versus Cancer. And the way we frame it is that patients, the question we ask is, what is the problem we want to address? And the problem is that patents and patent law are not adequate incentives for drug development for pediatric cancers, for example, osteosarcomas. Whereas patents are a terrific incentive for drug development for breast cancers, prostate cancers, and other major drug markets, they're inadequate when we think about tiny markets like osteosarcoma. How many people per year are diagnosed with osteosarcoma in the United States?
The estimate's at around 1,000 a year.
Okay, 1,000. So as you can imagine, if you're developing a drug as a company, developing a drug that most, but probably not all of 1,000 patients are going to take, it's just a tiny market. Even if you have patent protection for 7 or 10 or even 20 years, it's just not necessarily enough to enable this company to get in the market. So that's the problem that I'm dedicated to focus on as a lawyer and as founder of Kids v. Cancer. And then even there, the question is what kind of drugs? And there's two areas here. One is drugs developed expressly for pediatric cancers where there's no adult market. That's our first box, top box. And the second is drugs developed for adult cancers that could benefit children and young adults with cancer because, for example, the molecular target is relevant to a pediatric cancer. And so within that space, I want to first talk about the Creating Hope Act, which is, so Jacob died. And then the first question we addressed is, why is there almost no drug development for kids with medulloblastoma? Are there any drugs that have ever been approved expressly for osteosarcoma as the first indication? I bet the answer is no. Is that right, Christina?
Yeah, I mean, we're nearing 50 years since the first chemotherapy agents were approved. So we're still working with just, kind of old school chemo.
Well, I bet those agents weren't even approved. I bet they're not on the FDA label, although there's academic data on them. I'm pretty sure they are not on the label. I bet there are no drugs expressly approved for osteosarcoma. In 2012, I wrote a bill, and I'm a lawyer, so I had a leg up in that regard. I got a law firm and was a pro bono client. I put together a policy team, and we identified this as the issue we would address. We wrote the bill, and then we started lobbying. Congress passed it in 2012. And what the Creating Hope Act does, so let me just stop for a minute and talk about what it does, is it creates an incentive. Let's say I'm a small drug company and I decide I'm going to develop a drug for osteosarcoma. I work for 5, 10, 15 years, and I actually do, and I receive FDA approval for it. So, of course, the problem still is that there are only, 1,000 new cases of osteosarcoma per year. The market is tiny, right? Even if you multiply that market by years in treatment, it's still just a tiny, tiny market. So the way this works is that once I get my approval for my osteosarcoma drug, the FDA would give my company a voucher. And the voucher comes with rights to faster FDA review of any other drug for any other disease. It can be a GLP-2 drug for obesity, for example, or a drug for heart disease. And I can sell the voucher. So what this means in practice is that we're seeing a lot of small companies that, would develop drugs for pediatric cancers or other pediatric rare and life-threatening illnesses. And if they actually develop a drug and receive FDA approval, they get the voucher. And on day one, they can sell the voucher. So we're seeing them sell the voucher to Sanofi and Pfizer and AstraZeneca. And currently, vouchers are selling for about $150 million. So that is revenue you get on day one. And it constitutes, a marketable incentive. This program has resulted in 60 new drugs for kids and young adults with pediatric cancers and other life-threatening illnesses. The weakness of the program, the main weakness is it has to be reauthorized every 4 years. And why is that? It was just a political compromise that we had to make when the bill was first passed into law in 2012. That hasn't been a problem. The Creating Hope Act Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program was reauthorized in 2016 and 2020. But then in 2024, we ran into some roadblocks. What happened was that when President Trump won in November, there was a lot of question about sort of what direction Congress would go in. Congress did put the reauthorization in what's called a continuing resolution to fund the budget in December. But Elon Musk started tweeting his opposition to the continuing resolution, in particular, his perception that it wasn't appropriate for so many bills to be riders to the continuing resolution to fund the budget. Unfortunately, Elon Musk he has a South African education, not a U.S. education, and he didn't realize that is actually how bills are passed in Congress. The Schoolhouse Rock video that many of you have probably already seen, the I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill. That's not actually how bills are passed. They're almost always passed as riders to bigger projects. But Elon Musk started tweeting that he'd fund anyone who primaried Republicans who voted for the continuing resolution. So 3 hours before the vote, to the surprise of everyone, the continuing resolution fell apart, and it was ultimately passed without the healthcare package. And the healthcare package, of course, included this important reauthorization. So for the first time since 2012, the program has expired. Now, the second issue, going back to sort of the development of kids versus cancer in our policy. After we got the Creating Hope Act passed into law, what we realized is this: look, an incentive of $150 million is a valuable incentive, but the fact is it's still so difficult to develop drugs expressly for pediatric cancers. And yet there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of drugs in development for adult cancers. So the question is, how can we ensure that the drugs developed and approved for adult cancers are tested in pediatric cancers, so that if some of these drugs can benefit, for example, children and young adults with osteosarcoma, that physicians have the information they need to prescribe those drugs. And so we went back to the drawing board. We wrote another bill called Race for Children Act, which Congress passed in 2017. Race for Children Act authorizes the FDA to require companies to undertake studies of newly approved adult cancer drugs in pediatric cancers when the molecular targets of the adult cancer drugs are relevant to pediatric cancers. So this bill has been a real game changer. Before it was passed in 2017, it would take 7 to 10 years for a newly approved drug to be studied and for pediatric cancer. And some were just never studied. And the reason is, of course, they're so expensive. Academics can't get access to these drugs. They can't pay for the drugs, and companies won't provide them for free. After passage of the Race for Children Act and after implementation in 2020, we now see that about 80% of all adult drugs that should be studied in pediatrics, because there'd be a public health benefit, are being studied like right now for pediatric cancers. So it's pretty exciting. The program is discretionary. The FDA may also waive this requirement if, for example, it's not in the interest of this patient population to have the study undertaken. For example, if it's too toxic, if there's another drug that's more of a priority, if there truly aren't patients who have indication for which this drug is relevant, FDA can also defer the requirements. Race for Children Act's been transformative. The problem that still remains, though, is one that all of you, I'm sure, understand, and very few others in Congress do, and that is the following. If you're going to get to a cure for cancer, a pediatric cancer or osteosarcoma, you need to have a cocktail of drugs, a combination, right? Very infrequently do cures occur with one drug therapies, right? And that's why you see in the protocols, for example, for osteosarcoma, it's almost always a series of multiple drugs, right, over a period of time. So because the Race for Children Act only authorizes the FDA to require single drug studies, what we've seen is that we're getting a lot of really exciting data and information about how to use drugs, but we're not getting new cures because all the studies are single drug studies. So we went back to the drawing board, and we started working on a new bill called the Give Kids a Chance Act. And what this says is that we are extending the FDA's authority under the Race for Children Act. And now, if the Give Kids a Chance Act is passed, the FDA may require a single or a combination study for a new adult cancer drug in pediatrics. And the way it would work is this. Let's say I'm a little company. Let's say I'm Pfizer now, and if I develop a combination therapy for adult cancers, upon approval, the FDA can require me to study that combination in pediatric cancers as well. If I'm Pfizer and I develop a single drug therapy and receive approval for it, FDA can ask for, pursuant to Race for Children Act, a study of that drug by itself. Or if and when Give Kids a Chance Act is passed, the FDA can say to me, Pfizer, look, you have in your portfolio other drugs that you own and that are approved that in combination with the drug that was recently approved may have a dramatic therapeutic benefit for a population of kids or young adults with a pediatric cancer. And so the FDA may require that study. The FDA can also require studies of a new single adult therapy drug with old chemotherapies. So that is the policy that we are advocating. It's specifically an amendment to the Race for Children Act. We started working on this in October 2019. And the way it works in Kids v. Cancer is it takes us about a year to 18 months to identify the problem we're going to focus on, to develop the solution that we're going to pursue to address the problem, to draft a bill, and to circulate the bill to the premier stakeholders and start negotiating the terms of the bill to try to get to a consensus. That can take 18 to 24 months. And then since the end of 2022, we've just been really working on lobbying and asking Congress to get it passed. We were actually hoping it would get passed in 2022, and we're still working on it. Now, I also just want to talk to you about what we're doing today. So we have a bill in front of Congress this year called the Give Kids a Chance Act. It is actually a combination of two of our policies. One is the original Give Kids a Chance Act that, Daniel and Jillian came to DC to talk about. But then we're also asking Congress to reauthorize the Creating Hope Act, the Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program. And the reason these two got rolled into one bill, still called the Give Kids a Chance Act, is that when the Give Kids a Chance Act, the original bill, went through Congress, went through the Energy and Commerce Committee in September for a markup, the Republicans and Democrats on Energy and Commerce made a deal, and they wrapped up the Give Kids a Chance Act with the Creating Hope Act Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program and 4 other bills. And they passed them together through the Energy and Commerce as a trade. And then they put them in the continuing resolution together as a package, as a 6-bill package called the Give Kids a Chance Act. So where we are this year is we are now asking again for Congress to pass the Give Kids a Chance Act. And we have had this bill introduced in the Senate. That's Senate 932 is the Senate number. And in the House of Representatives, which is HR 1262. The bills are slightly different between the two chambers. In both chambers, we have reauthorization of the Creating Hope Act Pediatric Priority Voucher Program and the Give Kids a Chance Act. And then in the House, we have the other 4 bills that were part of last Congress's package. All right, I'm going to stop here for a minute. This has been like a long and dry. Thank you for sticking with me on it. What can you do? How can you get engaged? And I'm so thrilled to be here. And I'm so thrilled to be talking to you, Christina, Daniel, and Jillian, and all of you on this Zoom, because MIB Agents has been a wonderful partner of ours. One of the key things we do to stand out on Capitol Hill is we bring kids and through college-age students to Capitol Hill to meet with members of Congress and their staff and ask for support of our bills. So in this center, you can see that crazy group of kids who came in September. And it was just really a lot of fun. We had just an amazing time. And you also see, pictures of others of you. You all know each other so well through the experience of Climb the Hill. Why is Climb the Hill so important to us? There are, by the way, and this is only open to young people, kids and college students. If you're older, the Alliance for Childhood Cancer has a lobby day in February or March, and we invite you to participate in that one. Ours is only for kids. What we do is we train you, we give you a schedule and a map, and we send you out. We do not chaperone you. And we found you're incredibly successful. We are, to the best of my knowledge, the only group on Capitol Hill that sends kids alone. And so thank you so much. I'm just going to quickly go to the other 2 things, and then I want to open it up to Jillian and Christina to talk about their experience, okay? For anyone else who's engaged, what do I need to get it out across the finish line now? We need a little bit of a political push. If you have a personal connection and you're wondering who to tell about it so that we can use it, me and Christina, please let us know. RFK Jr. would be terrific. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, would be very helpful. And of course, the president himself or anybody who knows him. So that's that cute little picture. Isn't that great? And then what else you can do to help? And Christina, could you put this link in the chat, please?
I will put that in the chat.
Oh my goodness, hold on. So for any of you who are listening, please click on the link, and it would give you an opportunity to write to your senators and your representative. I have below that what will pop up on your screen, an MIB Agents letter where you talk about your experience of pediatric cancer. These emails really count. What I do with them, and what we do with them at Kids v Cancer, is we periodically write to all the members of Congress who we are asking still to support our bills who have not so far, and we give them a list of all of their constituents who've contacted them. And that really matters to them. That is very motivating for them, because then they can contact you back and say, yes, I did act on your request. So my request is please fill it out and please post it on your social media, Instagram, Facebook, X, Blue Sky, whatever you use, and email, Snap, whatever. And please ask your friends and family to fill this out. The numbers really matter. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here and thank all of you. And maybe I will stop sharing and we can talk together about, in particular, about the Climb the Hill Day program.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Yeah, I definitely would love to get Daniel and Jillian's perspective and talk about their experience on Climb the Hill. Though, Nancy, we did get one question come in that thought you could just throw
yeah.
you can confirm. So I think this is about the Creating Hope app. So the question is, the program expired, but if a PRV has been approved prior to 2024, then it can still be issued. Is that right?
So that's a great question, and I'm really glad that you asked it. So thank you, whoever you are. So there are different pieces to this program. What the expiration means is that if a company has not submitted their drug for approval or it has not been approved, and if the company's drug is approved between December when the program expired and now, or whenever it takes until the program is reauthorized, that company will not receive a voucher. So that's a big hit. Now, some companies received vouchers in the past and they sold them, and the holders of those vouchers may still exercise them. So that's okay. In addition, there's a process before a company applies for approval called the designation process. And the way that works is sometime around late phase 1 or phase 2, a company may apply to the FDA and submit forms which ask the FDA to state that their drug may or may not be approved. But if it is approved, it's being developed for a pediatric cancer indication that is life-threatening, that is rare, and that would qualify for a voucher if the drug is approved. So companies, technically speaking, they cannot receive designations at this time, although FDA until yesterday, FDA was informally issuing designations, the legal status of which was sort of unclear. I think the idea was to issue designations and then once the program was reauthorized, clarify that all those designations would have legal standing. Now that we've had major cuts in the FDA, I don't know that the FDA will continue doing this or not. So we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, thanks for that. I actually do want to pivot back to some questions around Give Kids a Chance Act, but I also wanted to open it up for Jillian and Daniel to talk about Climb the Hill, and if you guys wouldn't mind sharing your experience.
I can go first if that's all right. So basically the main part of Climb the Hill was we were talking to representatives, and because it's like only the kids or like these young adults that are talking to these representatives, it gives the chance for like the aides to really understand personal stories, which I think is the most effective part of Climb the Hill, is being able to share like personal details and how like having like multi-chemo drug treatments like can help us survive. And we can also like just really like show how much like the growth in like pediatric cancer research can help people in the future, and how little treatments are like being improved as of now. So yeah, again, that's the most effective part, and being able to talk to these aides in small groups without any other like supervision is really like, I think it's so effective, and that's what really like caused this push. Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Jillian, just to follow up on what you said. So here's the very sad truth. Nobody really wants to talk to me or other mothers or fathers. Like, we're angry, we're depressed, we're aggressive, we're over intellectual, like we're just like not fun, it's still important, of course, for us to go and tell our stories, but our superpower in our community is Jillian and Daniel and their peers. And that's why we put them up front. And we don't do it with their parents, because who wants to talk with your mother listening, right? Okay, so now, Daniel, I'm going to pass this on to you.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think we definitely got that same sentiment, I guess conveyed back to us by the senators and staffers that we met. Some of them were like surprised to see just kids, but others expected us. But I think everyone appreciated a little bit of a change of pace.
And, these staffers, imagine this. So when you're a staffer, or when you're a member of Congress, you get like 4 or 5 appointments like this a day, 5 days a week, 40 weeks a year, for the 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 years of your career, right? All of these constituent meetings just blur together. We, to the best of my knowledge, are the only one who sends in kids with no adult chaperones. So here's the thing, Daniel. When I have follow-up meetings with these staffers and follow-up calls, everybody remembers everything about your meetings. And that's not the case otherwise. So they are incredibly effective. And I just want to just sort of put it out there for any of you at MIB who are young adults or kids who would be interested in participating. I invite you to participate. You can contact maybe Christina, you could be a source, and Anne Graham as well, or Jen, Jenn at kidsvcancer.org. So we invite people to come. We have MIB specific Climb the Hill days, and then we do periodic ones for whomever would like to come, including our major one is in September, and it's around the Cure Fest.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Daniel and Jillian, you guys went with the big MIB group in September, right, for Cure Fest. So it looks like, I was just taking a peek on your website, Nancy, and it looks like September 19th is the date for this year. And so it also sounds like you do have, that's like a big in-person one, but you do also have Zoom opportunities. So for people that can't travel at this moment, they can still participate.
That's correct. And we're also quite flexible, put together, a few friends and contact us, and we'll just put together meetings just for you separately. We really, we do this for a couple of reasons. I mean, we do it because you're so damn politically effective. So thank you. But, I think it's also really important to promulgate civic engagement, and you are all our investment in the future. And so we want to give you these experiences so that we can train you as leaders and engage you in solutions going forward.
And I put the email address where you can email Jen at Kids v Cancer if you'd like to get involved, as well as the website where there's a form where you can fill out to get more info. And it sounds like there's also a nice setup and training that you guys do with people that want to participate to kind of prep them for how to engage.
Jillian or Daniel, do you want to talk a little bit about how you experienced that training program?
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about it. So it was it wasn't too big of a deal. We had breakfast together in the visitor center, if I remember correctly, of the Capitol. Went over the bill. We got I have it right here. We got a little folder with I don't know, little stuff, but some information and notes, and it just helped get us through the day. All that.
I think another thing that was important is that I think people can be really confused on the fact, aren't we already testing drugs for kids? But then the whole idea about the combination drugs was something that was hard to communicate if it wasn't in person. So having, first of all, Nancy Goodman explain it to us in that meeting, and then we could easily explain it to the representatives was really nice. Yeah.
And I also do want to emphasize for anyone else who's part of the MIB community, Jillian and Daniel are high school and college students. We'll take kids, we'll take 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds. We'll take anybody who wants to come. We do have an input process usually, especially for the younger kids, where we interview them without parents to make sure that this is something the child really wants to do. It's not mom's idea. And we don't permit parents to be present during the training program. But for anyone who's interested in participating, you can be as young as you wish, and we will take you. We will take little kids if they want to come. And for little kids, we'll pair them up with a older kid. We'll pair them up with a Jillian or a Daniel or someone who has direct responsibility for the little kids. So I really encourage you all to participate. It matters. It really matters. The pediatric cancer community lacks certain resources that other lobbying groups have. We don't have the financial resources to donate to members of Congress's campaigns. We don't have thousands of lobbyists. We don't have a whole shop doing policy analysis and communications to our troops. Our only secret weapon is the kids. And that's how the community gets things done. And so we don't have this program because it's so much fun and so interesting for you. I hope it is. I hope it's amazing, but we do it because we need it. So when you're 20 or 19 or 16 or 15 or 8 even, there may or may not be that many opportunities where you can contribute in a way that I can't, and that your parents can't, and that other adults can't. It's really something that this is the piece you need to do. We can't do this part.
So I want to pivot back a little bit to just the specifically the Give Kids a Chance Act. And so the whole combination therapy thing is so important because, as you mentioned, Nancy, I mean, I think probably any scientist today will tell you that we're not curing anything with one drug, that everything has to be a combination therapy. And in fact, the standard protocol for osteo today, which is like a 3-agent chemotherapy, even that's still multi-agent, right? And that was created nearly 50 years ago. So, and I wasn't really aware about regulatory hurdles in doing combination trials. And so can you just expand on that a little bit in terms of, I don't know if I fully understand kind of what some of those hurdles are, maybe both on the pharmaceutical company side, but also on the academic side?
So let's say you're, who really wants to do the studies? And it's our academics mostly, right? So let's say you are working with OSI or MIB or some of the scientists whom you fund, and they have a theory about a combination that they would like to study. And they have a theory that if sort of 2 or 3 or multiple targets are hit at the same time, that it could potentially permanently, it could have a durable response for osteosarcoma metastases. That would be pretty exciting. And hopefully some of the work they're doing now will have that result. And it has for Daniel and Jillian. So what do you do? So first oftentimes what scientists do is they do genomic analysis, or they read literature about what's happened in adult clinical studies to decide, what combination merits study. Okay. Then you identify the combination. Maybe you do some mouse modeling. The scientists determine that this merits study in patients with osteosarcoma. Well, then the question is, how do you get the drugs, right? Now, all of these old chemotherapies, they're really, really cheap. They're all off patent. They all cost 50 cents to $2 per patient per treatment, or maybe even for the entire protocol. They cost nothing. So when you're putting together a clinical trial with chemotherapies, there are a lot of expenses associated with the trial, but the drugs are not one of the expenses. There's expenses associated with accrual fees, transportation fees, biostatisticians, conferences or other forums that are necessary to bring scientists together to deliberate about what the protocol will be. But maybe the cost of the drugs is not a major expense. So, but then what happened sort of around 2000 is this drug called Gleevec was FDA approved. It was a targeted therapy that turned out to be, for AML, have a dramatic response and be even curative for about half the patients who were treated with it. The other half, it turns out they needed combinations. And it was marketed, it was approved, it was marketed, and from Gleevec on, cancer drugs have been, newly approved cancer drugs have been very expensive. And as you all know, they can be hundreds of thousands of dollars for treatment of a new cancer drug. There are even new rare disease drugs that are $2 million per patient. So the issue is that now if you're the scientist, you don't have a budget to pay for those drugs. If you want 100 kids in a study or 400 kids in a study, you can't afford $200,000 per patient for the drug times, 100 or 400, right? So you need to go to the company and ask the company for a free supply of drugs. That's where things get tough. Now, if you're the company, of course there are people in the company who want to cure kids from osteosarcoma. Of course there are. But let me tell you, those scientists, they don't really have that much leeway in their company to work with academics to share drugs. They, and they don't. There's so many reasons they wouldn't share. So what are the reasons? First of all, the drugs cost them something. A drug that they're selling for $200,000 may cost them, well, if it's a CAR T therapy, for example, it may cost $150,000 to manufacture the CAR T, which they sell then for $450 or $500,000. I mean, the drugs may cost less than $150,000. They may cost $50,000 or even $10,000, but it's not nothing. It doesn't to provide clinical supply of a drug to academics. And then there's the problem that when they have these really expensive drugs, they're looking for second and third indications from adult cancers. And so they don't want some team of PIs in pediatric cancer to start providing FDA with new data on these drugs that could potentially compromise their efforts to win secondary indications in the adult markets, right? Now, it may or may not happen, but it may. And you can say, well, they're being selfish, blah, blah, blah. I get that. I get that all. But the fact is, it cost like $1 billion to bring a drug to market, and you only get reimbursed if the drug is approved, right? So these companies have a lot riding on getting their drug approved and then getting approved for as many indications as possible. The third issue is that it's plus and minus. So I'm sure you know of young adults who relapsed and their oncologists started giving them all sorts of off-label drugs, right? So the good news is that the reason they can do that is because insurance companies tend to reimburse for off-label use of drugs for pediatric cancer patients. That's the upside. But the downside of that is that, so now there is literally no marginal revenue for a company to do these studies because they're already getting paid by insurance providers when pediatric oncologists are just winging it and just providing off-label drugs. The pediatric oncologists don't really have data as to whether they work. They don't know the dosage. They don't know the scheduling. They are uninformed about toxicity risks. But they may have a theory for why it makes sense to try it for some kid who's relapsing and has run out of treatment options. So, of course, we want to keep off-label access available for kids and young adults with cancer, but that makes the marginal revenue for a company to go in this space zero. So there's some risk in terms of going into other adult spaces, adult indications. There's no marginal revenue. All these companies, remember, they're all for-profit companies. They all have fiduciary duties to their shareholders, or if they're not public, they're private, and I know this sounds counterintuitive. They are all capital. They have capital constraints that really limit what they can do because drug development is so expensive. So that's the problem. The problem is these drugs are so damn expensive. Companies just aren't going to do it. Okay, that's with a single drug. Now, what if it's a combination? It's that problem squared, right? Because now you're looking at two drugs. The FDA may learn of a toxicity or contraindication of the two drugs in a pediatric population that companies just don't want the FDA to know about because, it was so expensive for them to do these studies. I do want to also add, Christina, pursuant to the Give Kids a Chance Act, the FDA can only ask for combination studies when companies own both drugs or all three drugs or however many drugs would be in the study, or the other drugs are off patent, they're old chemotherapies. Because then those are cheap and there's also so much data on them that's available. Now, that does limit us a little bit, but actually it doesn't limit us that much because what we're seeing is that among combinations of drugs that are submitted to FDA approval for adult cancers, somewhere between 75 and 85, 90% of all combinations are from the same company anyway. So it's a small limitation. It should be enough to assure scientists in these companies that there's not going to be intellectual property concerns or pricing concerns or sharing of business confidential information concerns. We just we just ensure that all the drugs are owned by the same company.
Gotcha. So definitely.
Also, by the way, just note to file, Christina, that's why you see these major companies acquiring drugs in it, every time there's a new class of drugs, there will be a dozen forms of this that every major company tries to acquire so that they have all the combinations in-house. They don't want to be relying on another company to do a combination either.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, kind of all the different, the domino effect, right? And so this act definitely incentivizes, I mean, it basically allows academic researchers to kind of procure the drugs that they need for their study.
It also gives scientists in companies leverage, because if we get this passed, then they can go to their peers and then say, hey, this fulfills a regulatory requirement. I think the scientists and the business development people in these companies want to do these studies. And so we would just be giving them, wind behind their sails to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Daniel and Jillian, I just want to make sure, do you guys have any other questions? Oh, okay. We just got another question in. I'll throw this question out, but I want to just make sure you guys had a chance to ask anything if you wanted to. Okay, so question just came in. Okay, what are the sound bites that are most impactful when talking to staffers? So like when you're going to DC and you're meeting with these congressional representatives, and Daniel and Jillian might be, I kind of actually was interested to hear also, like, from your experience talking to some of these representatives, what you think did resonate the most with them, and also just some of the feedback that you got from them that you thought was interesting or that you were kind of surprised to hear, and what questions they were kind of asking you that they seemed to be most interested in.
I will say, like, one of the most effective things was showing, like, prosthetics, which I don't have a prosthetic, but I had, like, 2 people in my group who did have, and they were like the staffers were like super, super interested in that. But I think something else that's really effective is that, like, we would be showing people, like, how we have succeeded because we survived osteosarcoma. So, like, a lot of us in my group in particular were like college students, and we'd say, like, oh yeah, we're majoring in this and this, but we were also, like, extremely stern, like, we're just, like, one of the few people who have been able to, like, survive this.
Yeah, I think I was gonna say the same thing about showing prosthetics or showing scars, just having that, like, tangible, like, thing right in front of them. And yeah, I think going in with, like, an optimistic tone really just, like, probably help let their guard down a bit, so that they I don't know, maybe they thought we were gonna be, like, coming in and, like, complaining a lot about our whole situation or whatever, but just showing that success stories do exist, and it's because of things like combination treatments and legislation that they could play a role in.
Well, really appreciate both of your efforts to do that, to engage and to go to DC to participate in that. I wanted to also ask, I think we've laid out, and in the chat for folks that are here, you'll see there are links to 2 really concrete things you can do as a patient advocate. One is to sign up for Climb the Hill. The other is to kind of fill out that form to send a note to your representatives. Nancy, I also wanted to just ask, I mean, the scientific community, of course, can do that as well, but are there any particular things that the scientific community can do to kind of engage with advocacy groups, with policymakers to push forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much for that. So I would say for the scientists, the question and the physicians, the questions are not so dissimilar from what we would ask the kids to do. So first of all, if you have a personal relationship with somebody in the White House, with Speaker Mike Johnson, with HHS Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr., some folks in our community do. Please let me know. If you can't, I'm at Kids v Cancer. And if you don't remember me, call up Christina and tell her, call up Anne, call up Julian or Daniel. Let us know, because that really does matter. That's the first thing. The second thing is talk to your patients and see if anybody wants to get involved politically. So, as you know, HIPAA requirements bar hospitals oftentimes from reaching down and asking their patients to get involved. But you can just tell them that this opportunity exists. And if it exists, again, please send them to MIB. Or if you're not an osteosarcoma physician, send them to, Kids v Cancer. It really matters. And then, by the way, when you send them through us, we can loop back. We can even do lobby days with you and your patient. That's incredibly effective on the Hill as well.
Very cool. A couple other questions that came in, and this kind of circles back to the kind of what resonates, but a question about when reaching out to representatives, are there key words or statements that catch their attention? And, lots of this person, some of them have sent a lot of emails, made a lot of calls, and not sure if anyone's reading them. So kind of any suggestions for how to just kind of cut through?
So first of all, I think you don't know whether it's cut through or not. I think Jillian and Daniel were I think you were both at the spring, the March. Were you both at the March? Yeah, you were both there. Remember when it turned out that some of the most unsuccessful meetings the group had turned out to be the ones that got co-sponsorships the fastest?
Yeah, I think that was Daniel's group.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who it was. Oh, yeah, it was, what state is Andrew from?
It's a senator who is no longer
Indiana, I think. Mike Braun.
Mm-hmm. Mike Braun, yes.
Yeah, we didn't think the meeting went so well, and then I think, I think we ended up getting co-sponsored or something.
Came back, you told me the meeting was lousy.
Yeah.
And I told you, they just emailed to say they were co-sponsoring. It's the only co-sponsorship we got that day. But we got a bunch of others. You can never tell. Staffers say no, 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 no until they say yes. So you have no idea whether you're progressing or not in their estimation. And by the way, some staffers say yes, 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 and then never, pull the trigger. So you can't read them.
Interesting. And let's see, this is maybe a good question to kind of close it up with is just kind of next steps. So, unfortunately they passed that resolution, the continuing resolution they passed the budget without the continuing resolution. So kind of what is the next step? Like when is, the House and Senate going to next review this? And
yeah. Well, there are, by the way, that wasn't the only milestone that we had in the past 4 years. We've had loads of opportunities. Some we progress, some we don't progress. The next opportunity is next week. We have a markup in the Senate, hopefully, and we'll see how that goes. But if it doesn't happen, that doesn't mean all is lost. It's just that's our next opportunity. And then we may have a markup in the House before Memorial Day, or we may not. And or it may be passed by then into law. You just don't know. You can never tell. And especially in this environment, it's just there's so much upheaval right now.
Yeah, that must be a challenge, I would say, in the current climate, especially with some of the current cuts. The FDA, for example.
So it's pretty disheartening. NIH grants, the indirects have been cut in a way that is really going to undermine research, cancer research generally. Tariffs are going to really make it difficult for drug companies to get in this space because it's going to be so much more expensive. FDA cuts are going to make the risk of not approval much higher. So it's going to be much riskier industry. So, we're in a pretty bad time. And I think that the importance of Give Kids a Chance Act is that, we may be, 3 steps back, but if we can go 1 step forward, it's a step we can actually have some control over, or we may have control over it.
Yeah. The legislation is, I feel like, such a powerful lever because it really does create a win-win for everyone. And it kind of, as you've noted, it doesn't cost, there's no taxpayer money involved. It's just a smart way to just set up that whole ecosystem so that everyone wins. And I so appreciate your analogy with the elephant because I feel like, at one level, just in general, how do we solve, pediatric cancer just seems so unwieldy. And then even if you break it down to just legislative advocacy, just because, again, dealing with government sometimes just sounds so unwieldy. Where do I start? How do I know? I'm sending all these emails. I don't even know if anyone's responding. But I think just breaking it down to just remembering it is just one bite at a time. And as you mentioned, there's going to be continuous milestones, right? You just continue to persist.
Yeah, when people get into this community and they ask, what can I do to make a change? My advice is oftentimes, pick something very, very narrow and take ownership of it. Christina, putting together these OsteoBites makes a difference. And if that's your one contribution, it is moving the needle. And for, Jillian and Daniel, being on the jab at MIB and I know you do a lot of public speaking in Washington, D.C., not only on Capitol Hill, but you've gone to the National Cancer Institute and to the White House, and you participate in these OsteoBites. The public speaking that you do and the writing that you do really matters. So don't do everything. Take one narrow piece and do it well.
Okay, that's good life advice in general, I think. Thank you so much, Nancy, for joining us on OsteoBites today and for making it better for pediatric cancer patients. More information on this and all OsteoBites can be found on our website at mibagents.org, on the MIB Agents YouTube channel, and at your favorite podcast place. We have a lot going on for the rest of the month. Next week, on April 10th, we have a special edition of OsteoBites that will be entirely in Spanish. Dr. TJ Ward from Nicklaus Children's Hospital in Miami will provide an overview of surgical options and advances in osteosarcoma in Spanish. We also have a new episode of our AYA Cancer podcast, Osteo, dropping on April 17th. Mia and Sammy are going to discuss experiencing FOMO as an AYA cancer patient. And then we'll be back on April 24th with Dr. Brian Flesner, who's a veterinary oncologist from the University of Maine. Dr. Flesner will discuss a new canine clinical trial studying an autologous cancer vaccine with checkpoint inhibitor for the treatment of canine osteosarcoma. So lots going on. You can find our OsteoBites lineup for the next few months on our website. And if you have any ideas for topics that you'd like to hear about, please feel free to share them with us at events@mibagents.org. Thank you again, Nancy, Jillian, and Daniel, for spending an hour with us today. And thanks to all of you for taking time out of your day to join us. We hope to see you back here soon on OsteoBites. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Jillian. Thanks, Daniel.